Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian. Some of you know me as Triangle Investor from social medias. Today, I have a special guest in my show, a familiar name on social medias, junior mining investing events organizer, and much more. He's a founder of Soar Financial Partners, Mr. Kai Hoffmann. Welcome to my show, or better to say, willkommen, mein Freund, if my German is okay.
Absolutely. Your German is fantastic. Danke für die Einladung. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
My German is sehr schlecht, but never mind. Let's go. You're usually on the other side of the camera, but not now. And since you are my guest for the first time, I would like to hear more about you, your origin story, your company, and what are you doing in your life and with your company. Tell me more.
Yeah, happy to. No, appreciate the invitation, Lucian. Appreciate being on your channel, and quite like your channel as well. You've got some fantastic guests on, so really appreciate to be one of them. Maybe a bit of background story. I started investing. Actually, my first mining stock I bought when I was still in university because I had quite an eccentric professor back in the day called Professor Bocker. And if you're in the German community, you at least know him, and he's been a bit of a resource guru in our space. But it was just by fluke, but just by chance that he was one of my university professors. And he came back from a site visit and told us all about it. He's like, "Oh, this is the greatest story, and you have to own it." It was North American tungsten back then. And I think I invested 500 euros or something like that. I was a university student, and pretty much the first stock I ever owned. But the stock did well. Like I sold it at 70 cents, bought it 50. So I caught my first whiff. Unknowingly, I'll end up in the sector, right? Always thought I'd end up maybe doing something techie. I used to work for Deutsche Telekom back in the day. Loved Facebook and Web 2.0 things. But I ended up in mining, which I absolutely love. Like, there's a lot of good people in the sector. There's one of the main reasons I was attracted to it. Made a lot of good friends, and just still chatting with them today. Like, one of my best friends is I met him actually at a conference, and he had the booth next to me back in 2009. Right. And we still chat. So I got off the phone with him only a couple hours ago, and we were exchanging thoughts on one of the deals he's working on. So it's fantastic community. So been attracted to that. But back to my origin story, I started Soar Financial back in 2011, went independent then. 13 years now of a bear market, so I'm still waiting for a win, to be quite honest. Caught sniffs of it, but it's been fun. Like, we've been working with a lot of companies over the years and really refined our sniffer, and I think we've gotten quite decent at it. If you look at the roster, for example, of the Deutsche Goldmesse, the German gold show, we're trying to be quite picky when it comes to company selection, and I think that shows. But I've been an investor in the space. I've been working in the space for the last 14, 15 years now, and it sounds unbelievable, actually, if you look at it. Yeah, it's end of September almost here, 2024. So it's been easily 15 years in the space, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. And back in 2020, of course, like so many others, we created a YouTube channel because we wanted to look the CEOs in the eye when we interviewed them, because we couldn't do that in person. And that's sort of where Soar Financial and Soar Financially, like the YouTube channel, evolved. And back last year, we joint ventured with Brian London on the Gold Newsletter channel, where we do a lot more company interviews and put that content out there.
Your content is great. Like we discussed prior, we pushed the play button. I really like and respect your content. It's a brilliant one, and I urge my followers and my viewers to see it. I want to start with questions with broad markets. We will start with broad markets. How would you comment Fed policy in general? And of course, your comment on yesterday's first interest rate cut since early days of COVID pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting times. And coming from the junior mining angle, perhaps, maybe we'll take a look at everything through that lens. Because if you were a junior mining investor, everything really went downhill March 2022. That's when the first rate cut happened. Risk capital really disappeared in our sector, or it felt like it, at least when it comes to volume on the stock market. We still raised decent amounts of money. I looked at the numbers because I also run Oren Inc., by the way, a data company that tracks junior financings in this space. And so far, we've closed on financings roughly around $2.6, $2.7 billion. Last year, we raised about $4.4 billion. So we're lagging a little bit behind, but it's not bad at all. Like, if you compare it to 2015 and other times in the market, the junior mining market is doing quite well. Fed impact, we will have to see. It's a bit early days. Looking at my charts over here, of course, a lot is green. Also has a lot to do with gold trading over $2,600, which is a phenomenal price. 26.15, I believe we're at right now. Of course, that causes some momentum in the junior stocks, but I feel like sentiment is changing a little bit, and that's where maybe me running a PR firm comes in as well, because we're starting to have a bit of different conversations with our clients as well. So that's an indication for me that sentiment might be changing as well. I was in Beaver Creek, probably the most important junior mining investment conference on the globe. That's where 250 companies or so meet with investors, roughly 1,100 people there. And sentiment was really, really positive. I'm not sure if you've seen my LinkedIn and Twitter post about it, but it feels like we've been going through various stages of grief in the junior mining space, and we finally hit that last stage, the acceptance phase. Because I've noticed in my conversations, none of the CEOs and none of the investors has complained about the market. Meaning we've accepted, okay, the market is challenging for the smaller companies, but and maybe that's where hope comes in as well. Is like we're actually doing okay. All right, we have a decent project, we have some ounces in the ground, we'll be fine. And a lot of companies I've met actually have money in the till as well, and that's I think quite surprising, given the sentiment.
Yeah, there is money in the system. That is a fact. And you mentioned sentiment. You're right about that. But are you seeing, I mean, among retail, on social medias, a fear of a bigger correction in the near term or in the mid term? Let's say maybe not in 2024, because, like I said, the money is there is a lot of money in the system, but do you see, or do you interact with other people that are fearful of a bigger correction in 2025?
I'd say no. I think we're more hopeful than fearful, and that's what I mean is the junior mining market. If I look at the main markets, I think yes, that's a possibility, and that will drag down junior miners a little bit, and the gold price potentially as well. We've seen that in March 2020. We've actually seen it in August, just early in August, August 5th. We've seen the market correct quite a bit. And if you look at the performance of the S&P 500, for example, since about mid-July, we're pretty much net zero, right? Although we're trading at all-time highs. So the market is sort of lost, the main markets, so I always have to sort of specify a little bit, but the main markets have lost momentum. Not sure the Fed rate cut yesterday added more fuel to the, let's call it the rocket ship, for lack of a better term. It sounds too simple, but the S&P 500 topping out mid 5,800 points. It seems quite likely, given the backdrop of weaker unemployment data, revisions to the unemployment data, and general recession fears in the US. We can't shake that. Now the US dollar seems to be weakening based on the Fed rate cuts as well. Maybe there's some easy money returning, so inflation could be back, which is all weighing on the US dollar. Import costs are rising. So it's not looking as great. So on the main markets, yes, I do expect a bigger correction at some point. It's really tough to pinpoint. I've been in the recession camp for a while, and of course, I've been wrong, like pretty much everybody else, because we've expected the recession to happen about 12 months ago, maybe even 24 months ago, if you're really if you were optimistic, right? But I'm really positive on the mining market. And that's my bread and butter business, and I haven't been this positive. And if you watch some of the interviews I've done ever, like I run Deutsche Goldmesse, you mentioned it. I've run a conference, and my opening remarks in May where we hit the bottom. Like it was absolutely brutal to put that conference on. The companies didn't have any money. Sentiment was bleak. Nobody was really positive, and I think that's changed. To the contrary, actually, I wouldn't say we've done a full 180 yet, but let's say we're at 120 degrees.
Yeah, you're right. I would like to cover four commodities with you today: uranium, gold, silver, and copper. I know that you know a lot about precious metals, a little bit about uranium and copper. Let's start with my favorite, and that is actually uranium. What's your take on uranium, and how is do you have any uranium names in your portfolio? Tell me more.
So short answers, I don't own any uranium stocks, and I'll make it really simple because I don't understand the uranium market. I've been trying to look at it. I've been trying to understand it, but I have a hard time understanding where the supply comes from. I'm sure somebody will lecture me in the comments about where it is, but for me, it's like the penny hasn't dropped, and it hasn't dropped for many years. So maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know, but it's a market that hasn't opened it to myself, and I'm looking at the price performance. I'm looking at Sprott buying gazillion pounds of uranium, And the price, yes, it's moved from $20 to $80, but I think that was more of a function of big energy companies having to buy uranium again than maybe them just buying up the market, right? It is unexplainable to me where all the supply comes from. And until I've really understood that, or it has dried up, that supply, then I might be jumping on the uranium bandwagon. I think there's too much refined uranium on the market for people to understand and for me to understand. And I think the great headline was yesterday or 2 days ago, or might have been earlier. I think it was earlier this week. I think it was a Reuters report or Reuters article that the U.S. is investigating why uranium imports from China have exploded. Meaning they went from 0 to I don't know 160 tons. You probably know the numbers better than I do, but I thought that was interesting because they banned all Russian imports, and now they're importing from China. So it's like that market. It seems just is not up my alley. I have to admit, I'm pro-nuclear. I believe in nuclear energy. I think that's the future, but I don't understand the supply fundamentals of uranium. So I've stayed away. I've missed run-ups, phenomenal returns in Cameco, for example. There's next gen, but then again, like how many junior explorers do you need in the uranium space to make it viable? It all depends, I guess, on the politics as well. Like the U.S. said, well, we're not importing any more uranium or even refined uranium from Russia or Eastern countries. And of course, that'll have an impact on pricing at some point. We haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I have a non-uranium. It is nuclear-related question, and it's related with Germany, your home country. How is the sentiment for nuclear power over there? And do you see any shift in politicians' view about nuclear power in Germany?
They're revising their opinion. And it's quite interesting because now we're seeing reports come out that important information was retracted or redacted, that like certain things, important remarks were just blacked out. And so the Green Party, and they're in charge of the Ministry of the Economy, like they made it they made their decision based on wrong information, apparently. So, but in my opinion, I think they've been running on an agenda that they want to ban nuclear energy since the 70s. That they finally got into power 50 years later, and they followed through. Whether that was the right or wrong decision, I personally think it was an absolute wrong decision, because I think we're just hurting ourselves. I'm paying about 37 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour personally here in power. This lamp is quite expensive to operate, so we got to keep this interview short, right? But it's absolutely the wrong decision. Like if I talk to friends in the US, their power costs 6 cents, 7 cents. Like they can do interviews 4 times as long before they have to pay the same amounts. Like I'm simplifying things, but we're not competitive. We're seeing that in our economy. Volkswagen has to let go 30,000 people because they also bet on the wrong horse in terms of EVs. But we're not competitive. We're not cost competitive at all. And power is a big input factor. And it's a big competitive advantage if you have cheap power. And we got rid of the cheap power and we lost a big advantage. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay, Kai, what about gold? How do you see gold going forward, and which companies are your winning horses for that race?
A more and more difficult question to answer. I think gold has quite a bit of momentum. It almost sounds ludicrous to say, but I think it's almost realistic to see $3,000, like based on the momentum we're seeing, right? And if you would have asked me that 12 months ago, I would have sent myself to the loony bin personally, right? Or I remember Rob McEwen, I think 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, said we're going to see $3,000 gold. Everybody laughed at him.
Yeah.
Like if you go through the Twitter comments, everybody laughed at him. Citibank was one of the first ones that came out with a $3,000 gold price target just 6 months ago or so. It seemed absolutely crazy. So momentum is definitely in favor of gold. We're trading at 26.15. I don't see it ending anytime soon. Sadly, we're seeing geopolitical tensions rise in the Middle East. Not sure how much of that is already priced in. We see the Fed cutting rates. They've announced another 50 basis point cut more or less until the end of the year. That's positive momentum. And of course, dollar decline. And usually it should be against the US the gold price, but I think it's in favor this time because we'll need it as an inflation hedge because the weaker US dollar sends prices soaring within the US. So we'll see inflation return at some point. Again, seems like the recession forecast, I'm not sure it's going to be tomorrow. It might be in the next 9 to 12 months here, but we will see recession kick back in. And then gold is the perfect hedge for that, of course. And that's why I believe gold is still strong. I don't think we'll double from here in the next 12 months, but we still have some positive momentum behind us.
The other precious metal, silver, could double in the probably gold will not double, just like you said, but silver has potential to double. Would you agree on that? And what's your take on silver?
Yeah, silver is like a loaded spring. Silver has so much torque behind it, and it really depends on what camp you're in. I believe like it's 50% industrial, 50% precious. If you believe that the U.S. or world economy is going to crash, silver will have a harder time. But I think silver will catch up to gold at some point as well. That's why I think silver has been lagging because it has been seen more of an industrial metal. It's been used in solar panel production. I don't need to repeat myself or repeat what everybody else has been saying in the past year. But silver has its uses, and so far I think that helped silver back. Whether that's uh, voluntary or not. That's up for other people to discuss why silver is trading around the $30 mark, but we've broken through that level again. So $50 was the old high. I think that's definitely a chance that we're going to get there. And as I said, like with gold as well, if there's momentum, we'll break out. We'll make new all-time highs. I'm not a chartist, so I don't have an Elliott wave chart or a technical analysis for you. I'm solely based on momentum and sentiment, and that's all in favor for us. And I haven't been this positive in a long time there, Lucian.
Momentum, sentiment, and fundamentals, of course. What about copper? I mean, copper has a long term, in my opinion, a long term, it's one of the best plays out there. What's your take?
I tend to agree. Copper you need for everything. And again, I don't want to repeat what everybody else has been saying, the electrification of the world, EV adoption, and all of that. Yes, it has been slowing, but I don't think we can deny that it'll happen. Might be at a slower pace than everybody envisioned because governments, they have to borrow money to give it out. And they can't do that as freely anymore as they wanted to. So all the subsidies have been cut for electric vehicles. We see that in Germany, EV sales have been crashing because the government said, well, we can't give you 5,000 euros anymore to buy an EV. So Volkswagen now has to let 30,000 people go because the government said, we can't fund this science project here anymore, right? So that's what we're seeing. The people will have to come. Like, I think the technology is developing where it becomes really, really interesting. So we'll see more EV adoption, but it's a supply and demand thing. And in the end, I think, you know the numbers as well as I do. We need more mines. They're not being discovered. The development times and lead times of those new mines are massively long. And if you look at copper short term, yeah, I think we're fairly valued at 430. But if you look long term, I think copper has a long way to go. People mentioned $10 a pound copper. Yes, I would agree with that long term. Not tomorrow, but long term, we're definitely going to head there. Because if I look at the supply that's not coming online, it has to go that way.
Agreed 100%. We covered copper, uranium, gold, and silver. What other commodities do you fancy? What other commodities are you bullish besides those four?
Not too many others, I have to admit. Like, I'm staying away from the lithiums and the rare earths of the world because those are hype metals. And while they have their uses, I think they're highly manipulated. People say the same thing about silver, by the way. But I think there are other interests at play, especially for lithium and the rare earths. I think China plays a big role in that. I was reading articles about Ganfeng Lithium ramping up and lithium prices dropping. Like, it's tough to ignore that there wasn't a connection between the two. So I don't really follow that, like, because I think there's enough lithium in the world to agree there's enough rare earths in the world. It's more processing power, and once we either develop a technology that cleanly develops those metals, like we won't have any shortages of that, right? It's just more refining capacity that we're lacking, and we're building that up. And once we've caught up, like Tesla's building its own lithium refinery plant in Texas. Like that tells you everything you need to know. That there's a refining shortage. There's lithium pretty much anywhere in the world. Of course, it's highly concentrated in certain areas, but rare earths the same. You can probably go to your kid's sandbox and get some rare earths out of it, right? But refining that and getting that into a battery or a magnet is a different story. But I'm simplifying things, obviously. But I'm staying away from those metals. That's why I'm not too bullish. Like, I'm quite happy being focused on gold, silver, copper, and yeah, gold, silver, copper are probably the three most relevant to me. Other people would mention nickel and zinc, but again, very specific.
Yeah, agreed. I want to ask you a few questions about your due diligence. How are you managing risk when it comes to junior investing, and what are some key metrics that you follow when you are doing due diligence on the companies in the junior resource space?
Oh, I manage my risk poorly. I have to admit, I've been in the space for 15 years, and I'm still here, right? So I've managed it poorly. I haven't had the big win that would let me live on an island. But simply, it's like it sounds almost stupid, but it starts with people, right? But the problem with that is I've been in the industry for 15 years, so I know people, so I do have an advantage. So when
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, what's the first thing you look at?" Well, it's people. It's like, well, that only applies to a very short or small group of people that can actually use that as the first factor. Because we know, like, it's not just you go on a LinkedIn profile; it's easily manipulated, right? Like people deleting certain parts of the biography or their CV. So it's really tricky, and oftentimes you don't even know who's behind a company in reality, right? So having that it's really experience what that is in the end, like experience with people and how people operate, and a network is the second part of that. Maybe the part B of the people is having a network. So if I don't know a company or don't know people involved, I can always call somebody, right? So that's always, if somebody tries to get in the sector, if you know somebody, reach out to them, like share information. Like Twitter is phenomenal for that, right? If you don't know anything, just type in the ticker, like I don't know, a dollar symbol NXE, and you'll get all the information on NextGen, for example, and people's opinions, and you can filter that out, and you can start following people that you like. I think that's a really good start. That's where I do a lot of due diligence that way as well. And of course, then it comes down to commodities, jurisdiction. Like I'm fairly simple minded when it comes to that. As I said, gold, silver, copper, probably the three main commodities in my portfolio. And then jurisdictions, probably mostly tier one, a few exotic ones. And I forgot to answer your question about my favorite stocks, by the way. But in Ivory Coast is one of my biggest positions, right? It might be too exotic for some, but I love it there.
Yeah. What about the red flags? What are some red flags that keeps you away from investing in some company?
First, names. Second, share structure, right? It's really easy to do. A lot of me too companies, meaning like, oh, we're next door to. I really hate those because oftentimes they don't do a lot. So you got to be careful, like, and you can go through the balance sheet. That's an easy um, due diligence tool is actually CDAR Plus. You can just go through all the publications, go through the balance sheet, go look how much companies have spent on exploration versus G&A, meaning just general administrative costs or marketing. If they've spent only, let's say, $300,000 on exploration, but 1.2 million on marketing, you know you're the target, right? That you're not an investor, you're the target. And I think that needs to be very clear to you when you look at a company. Um, price, the management incentives. Like, has the management actually put in equity, or was it sweat equity, or did they vend in a project, which is another new favorite of mine? Because you can create a lot of shares for a project that you vent in. I've just seen a deal today, actually, where somebody did a deal with a number company in BC, and there was no clarification who's behind that number company, meaning it's like 014 something B.C. And that's fishy. Like, I have a hard time with that. It might be legit, don't get me wrong, but it needs further investigating, right? And I've seen deals where companies issued a gazillion shares for very little money, and in the end, some of the backdoor owners are well positioned, and again, you're the target. So that's something I look for. Very easy to do. Sometimes you can just flip through a deck. Sometimes it's just the name that throws you off. It's like, okay, due diligence done after 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, my investment philosophy is pretty much the same like yours. Final question, Kai. Who are the people that you respect the most in the industry? Let's say precious metals industry, people on social medias, market experts. Name me five if you can.
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't been prepared for that, so I got to think about that long and hard. There's quite a few that I work with and that have taught me a lot, right? And Brent Cook comes to mind, the Exploration Insights. I've known him for a long time, actually, and he's always got time, which I appreciate. He's always willing to explain a story or his thesis. Michael Gray, he's a research analyst at Agentis. He's become a good friend. He can explain things so well. I've been on quite a few site visits with him, and it's always educational because I'm not a geologist, I'm not an engineer, so I'm always sort of one step behind many other investors or industry insiders. He can explain it really, really well. Puts out some fantastic research. He's been one of the first investors or research analysts on Snowline, for example, on Founders. So he's been quite successful in the last 12, 24 months as well. Somebody I definitely would follow. Nikki Etzet-Bell, somebody I really appreciate. She's become a good friend over the last few years. Super smart, highly engaged woman in the industry. Not even sure that's worth highlighting anymore these days, but she's so omnipresent these days. She's a board member. She's on Hot Chili. She runs Bravo Mining, or she's the executive chairman of Bravo Mining. Just a super smart industry voice. We had her at our conference a couple times, and she's actually somebody who tells you how to sell a stock. We always talk about buying, right? But it's also selling, and she could clearly identify when to sell as well. So super smart. Luke Ten Hav is another investor I followed, and I've known him for quite a while. So it's amazing to see his development in the space. And I think he's made way more money than I have in the sector. So he's definitely doing something right. He's golddiscovery.com. Please follow him. Like, he's super smart, does a lot of detailed analysis on the stocks he owns, and he's been super successful in the last few years. And that's four. Who's fifth? Maybe Michael Horner, for example, CFO of Adriatic Metals these days. Somebody's voice I listen to on X. We exchange thoughts here and there as well. So quite a few younger names I've mentioned probably as well. I think Michael Gray might be the oldest in there, but I love seeing younger guys come up in the industry. Oh, Vukasin Pikovic is another one I love following. Just younger, like you got to give him a bit of a, what do you call it, some slack to a degree, because he's 23, 24 years old, but super smart. Adrian Godes is another one. Now I'm rambling. Now my brain's working. Now I got my head in the right space. Pete Panda, like really, really smart people, but they're all on the younger end. So I love the new generation that's coming up in junior mining, because I kept saying at the conferences, I just turned 40 this year, is I was the youngest person at this industry for the last 15 years. And that's finally changing in the last couple of years, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, agreed on those names. Great guys, great, a lot of knowledge, agreed 100%. Sorry, this is my final question. You name me 5 CEOs that you respect the most.
5 CEOs I respect the most. Oh, that's a good question. Okay. George Ogilvy, Arizona Sonoran. Duncan Middlemiss, Arizona Metals. No. But he was at West Elm. That's where I got to know him. I still need to catch up with him on the latest, what his plans are for Arizona Metals. We briefly chatted in Beaver Creek, but I need a proper download from him. CEOs. Paul Cronin, former Adriatic.
I know.
I think he's always done a great job. Like, he's taken a mine into production in 5 years, and so far he hasn't failed. We'll see. Ramp up is always difficult, right? But so far, phenomenal track record there. That's 3. Who else do I like? That's a good question. I should have prepared for that one. It is tough, like, because everybody's got their little nicks and knacks. Like, there's no perfect CEO, I'd say, right? Because everybody does something that pisses somebody else off, whether it's a financing that was below last financing price, or they book a marketing campaign that somebody doesn't like, but they're good people, right? And I think they do a solid job. So it's tough to come up with 5 names top of my head that don't rub anybody the wrong way. Like, and Eric Zaunscherp is always like GR Silver CEO. He's a stand-up guy, but the company hasn't been performing the last 2 years, but he's a good guy, right? Yeah. So that's a list, right?
You owe me one, but I will let you go with this. Thank you for coming to my show. It was a great chat, and I hope we will do this more often.
Listen, you got to come to Frankfurt.
I will probably. Tell me, when is the conference?
November 21st and 22nd. Would love to have you. It'd be an honor to host you.
Thank you very much, Kai.